Attention, attention all ghosts. Report to your scare stations immediately. Casper!
Yes, sir.
Casper?
This is Gun Cranks.
Hello again, everybody. Yes, it's another edition of the Gun Cranks. I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent T, along with American Handgunner editor Tom McHale, and our special assignments editor, which is kind of like 007, Roy Huntington. Hey guys, how you doing?
Good.
Peachy Keno.
Let's talk about ghost guns.
Yeah, ghost guns.
Ghost gun. Okay, they're chomping at the bit to get into this topic. This is something that's come up more and more of late. In fact, we've even had some reader input on this, and it's this whole idea of ghost guns. And Tom, you've got a great point that ghost guns are maybe more of a construct. The term ghost guns are more of a construct among gun control rather than what they are. So take it from there.
Let's define ghost gun. You know what a ghost gun is?
It's a homemade gun.
No. Do you know what a ghost gun is?
What's a
I mean,
ghost
yes,
gun?
it is a homemade gun.
Yeah.
But do you know what it really is?
Something that they made up.
It's a gun.
Yeah. It's just a gun.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's a gun.
That's it. So,
But ghost gun sounds so much scarier when you're trying to frighten people.
gee, I wonder if that's on purpose. I wonder if that would be really strategic if the media developed this term to have conniptions, you know.
You mean like gun safety in place of gun control?
Exactly.
Well, do you remember when Glocks
Exactly.
first came in? The media immediately dubbed them invisible guns because they would make it through an X-ray machine. You couldn't ever see them. And of course, we all lost our mind. We were all printing pictures of X-rayed Glocks, and you can see that it's a complete gun with bullets and a barrel and all that kind of stuff. And but I used to hear people saying, "Oh no, those guns are bad because they're invisible." It's like, well, ghost guns are the same way. Let's just call it what it is, which is for what they're talking about, it's some kind of a homemade gun or a gun that someone makes for themselves, regardless of the method. And so it's just a homemade firearm. And those are, oddly enough, ladies and gentlemen, legal according to the federal government and BATF rulings. You are allowed to make a gun for yourself, and they even tell you you don't have to put a serial number on it. Now it has to be, you have to make it for yourself, and it's not for sale, and you can't transfer it, but you can make a gun for yourself, and you don't have to put a serial number on it. And so I don't understand what the big issue about a ghost gun, because they're legal.
Well,
Yeah.
it's only an issue if you assume we're going to have gun registration.
Yes.
That's the only time it's an issue.
Yeah.
Well, you know, our producer brought up a good question when we were talking about this before we got started. She said, you know, I'm retired law enforcement, so is Roy. How many times does registration or having a serial number solve a crime? And the answer is not very often. Yeah. If they recover a gun, it's got a serial number on it, they do what's called a back trace. They figure out where the gun came from. And you know where the majority of those guns, either the guy who did it bought it, and that's simple, or the gun was stolen. So a back trace doesn't do you any good. You know that it was sold at such and such a gun shop. They go talk to Bill Jones, who bought the gun, and yeah, I reported it stolen 6 years ago, and now it's used downtown in a shooting. So I think Tom hit the really valid point here. It's not going to solve crimes as much as our friends in the media and certain politicians bleat about, we can't solve crimes. We can solve crimes just fine. It goes back to good old-fashioned police work. This is more about a registration scheme, and they hate the idea, I think we've all seen in the last 2 years, they hate the idea of not having people under their control.
Well, you know,
I have a pop quiz for you guys.
Okay.
Can I do a real fast pop quiz?
Yeah.
Because you guys are cops.
I knew there was going to be a quiz.
You guys are cops. There's no math involved in this pop quiz. So is it easier for a criminal to A, go buy a bunch of tools, sit around in their workshop and build a ghost gun, or B, listen carefully, buy one off the street from a buddy or someone else.
That's just what I was going to say when you said you wanted to do a survey. I thought
you're dodging the question.
No,
you're not answering.
Because in all of my years of being a policeman, I never once knew a thug in the street who had the wherewithal to make a gun. I mean, it's like, no, you steal a gun, and 5 minutes with a file, a stone, or a Dremel tool, you have a ghost gun because you've ground off the serial number. It's like,
you know what I'm really worried about is ghost drugs.
Ghost drugs. Yeah.
Yep. That's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to start making their own drugs.
Well, but where do you draw the line on this? Because, I promise you that if you allow me 10 minutes in Home Depot and a $20 bill, I could buy enough stuff to make a single shot zip gun shotgun. I mean, I promise you that I could probably in the parking lot I could assemble it if I had
but you're
file
like
and
a
wrench.
Gunsmith though.
I know, but it's just
like no one else. How many other people can do that?
I would say.
Well, Tom, you are not.
I am not.
So, and you've done a couple of stories on building what they call 80% guns. From a friend of ours, 80% Arms. Talk about how that works and how you just don't suddenly decide, hey, I need to rob a liquor store today. Let me get this stuff and go through it. But walk us through how it works, Tom.
Well, it depends. It depends on the gun and materials. I've built 80% handguns and I built 80% rifles. And I'll tell you, the rifles are an undertaking. We're talking milling and metalworking and routers and bits of shavings flying all over the place and hours of work and a giant mess, in case you're wondering. But it is fun and satisfying. But I mean, come on, really, given the choice between that and going down to the street corner and picking one up for $20 or $50, really?
And it's not cheaper to make an 80% gun.
It's actually more expensive than buying a new gun at retail. To buy a kit and the stuff you need to build it out. So
I look upon
they're more expensive.
Well, I look upon those things like when we were kids and you bought a model and you assembled a model and it was fun, right? And it gave you something to do for a little while and you set it up on your shelf. And I think most people I know who have built these 80% guns, they build one because they wanted to try it one time to see what it was like. They didn't do it because they wanted to get under the radar or none of that had anything to do with anything. They did it because it was fun to do.
Well, I have heard of one instance through law enforcement channels, and I believe it was L.A. I can't swear to it, but there was a guy that was doing this as a business. And he put out, I believe the number I heard was between 15 and 20 ghost guns. Okay, let's look at the big picture.
Already illegal.
So,
see?
Yeah. He's manufacturing guns without a license. That's illegal. They've recovered some of these guns off the street, and we all know, not even as law enforcement officers, you catch a guy dirty, how do you figure out where he got the gun? Because he's going to cut a deal and say, Jim Smith is building them in his garage. So that's how the feds ended up raiding this guy, and he's going to prison for a long, long time. Versus the thousands and thousands of guns that are stolen every day across this country. Serial numbers on them, it don't matter. They're sold on the street corner. Sometimes, a $3,000 pistol, $25 on the street. That's where the gun problem comes from. It's not these guns, as Tom would call them. I almost said the word, but they're just guns.
Well, let's
guns.
Focus the limited police resources on where the problems are. Like you say, Brent, stolen guns. And so, let's help educate people on how not to let your guns get stolen. Let's focus on that. And we don't. I read something the other day, and evidently this technology has been around for a little while, applied this way, but I was not aware of it. And that is that we all know the hysteria around 3D printers and the fact that the technology is there now that you can 3D print things that are structurally sound. In other words, you actually can 3D print a receiver, for instance, and build a gun around it. But this guy was very interesting what he did, because it's harder than it looks. You have to be familiar with how to program. You have to afford to buy the printer. You have to understand the technology. It's not, the local gang members, as Brent says. They're not going to go buy a 3D printer and try to make a gun. But this guy did something interesting. It was that to simplify a pretty complicated AR lower, he he formulated a program where you could print the lower in sections, simplified sections, which he then later bolted together. And so together, they, with like little flathead Allen screws, so together they made an AR-15 lower. But the question that was raised was, well, if you take a piece of that off, it's no longer a viable receiver. And so my question was, well, what part of that is the gun in that situation? So, the side, the magazine well, the back threaded port, which part of that would be the gun? And the only thing I could think of and how the feds are going to respond to that is that right now, if you have suppressor parts, then you have a suppressor, according to the BATF. And so if you have baffles, well, then you have a suppressor. And if they do the same thing with machine gun parts. And so if you buy a full auto sear for an M230 carbine at a gun show, not realizing that that's what it is, you just think, oh, it's an M1 carbine, I need this. Well, you own a machine gun. And so that's the only thing I can think of, is that they're going to look at this thing and say, if you own any of these parts, then you own a gun. So
you know what though?
I think
that's like saying let's go after deconstructed beers in a drunk driving murder case. Like, is the beer serialized? How can we track that back to the store?
Don't give them any ideas.
All of this is a giant smokescreen for obscuring the issue. The issue is real simple. Person A wants to shoot person B. What's the problem? Person A is the problem.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
It doesn't matter whether they use deconstructed beers or ghost guns or a stick. Are sticks serialized? Because sticks still kill more people than rifles. So
Yes.
we need to start serializing sticks, because ghost sticks, wow, you can't say that fast, can you?
Well, but you know what?
I mean,
it's back to what you were saying about the registration and control, because I could see Chuck Schumer right now going like this, looking over his glasses at the podium as he's saying that by demanding registration of these ghost guns, we will help to prevent the mayhem in the streets for our children.
Thousands of toddlers being killed a year.
But yet the mayhemer is still on the street.
Yeah, let's go get that and let's go concentrate on where the real crimes are. Like you say, stealing guns and violent drug things, and where the real problems are. I can't recall what the number is off the top of my head, but we all know that modern sporting rifle, AR-15 type platforms and whatnot are a tiny fraction of have a tiny fraction of involvement in crime every year. Almost not even on the chart regarding homicides, but yet they are, they're the popular guns because they look evil and mean, and that's why they use that term ghost gun. And so, should we start that just as the NSSF said? Let's stop calling them AR-15s. Let's call them modern sporting rifles. Let's have a campaign right now that whenever we see the term ghost gun, we counterattack and say, wait, you mean a gun?
Yeah. Well, that gets into the question, the corollary that I was going to throw out for discussion. As an industry, just focusing on the shooting industry, are we doing anything to help this problem, or are we just going, there's so little of them, it's such a minor, small part of the industry, let's not worry about it. But we all know, to coin or to use the old term, once the camel gets its nose under the tent, the rest of the camel's going to come in there pretty soon. So I think we're not worried about it just because it's such a small part of the industry, and that might cause some soul searching for us.
Can I say that I don't worry about it because it's legal? You see? In other words, when I see on the Outdoor Wire, the ABC company announces a new 80% lower available and this, and I just go, oh, good for them. They're starting a company. I wish them luck. It's a tough market to be in right now, and but it's like, it's legal. So it's why should we worry about it? I understand, but it's a shame because they're not breaking any laws, and I have yet to see how it's a real problem anywhere. As a matter of fact, I'll bet you that 80% of the 80% guns that are sold are never built.
Probably.
Yeah.
They're still sitting in the box because they get it off and they look at it and it was like, this is more complicated than I thought. So. I don't know.
So what have we figured out? We're gonna call for serializing beer, right? Can we agree on
And
that?
sticks.
I mean, for
Sticks.
safety, and sticks.
Well, you know what a huge category, and I can't remember if it's more or less than guns, but you know what kills a lot of people every year?
Yeah.
They're called personal weapons, hands and feet. Think about all the beatings
tattoos.
and deaths
We can
that occur.
serialize those.
Okay. Well, you know, like me, those are registered as deadly weapons.
I'm gonna get mine serialized. Elwood.
Actually, you know
We were
what?
going to do that one time.
You know what I'll do is I'll make sure that I'll send this to the producer. I'll put a link to the FBI uniform crime statistics because that information is really interesting, and you'll see where the different categories fall. And and it's like vehicles and personal weapons and drowning and bricks and stuff like that. And AR-15 style rifles are like way down at the bottom. So cool.
Okay, guys, to wrap this up, thumbs up or thumbs down, are ghost guns, homemade guns, unserialized guns, are they any kind of a problem in the grand scheme of things?
No problem.
No problem.
No problem. I have not
Come on,
seen
Tom.
a problem. Yeah.
This is a visual aid. That's what I'm trying to do.
I thought you were talking about unserialized beer. That's the problem. So
What was? I didn't catch that.
unserialized beer.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Stop.
I only
giving
drink
them ideas.
serialized beers.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, this is degenerating, as it always does here on the Gun Cranks. So let's wrap this thing up. We've talked about ghost guns, unserialized guns, homemade guns, whatever kind of guns. They're just freaking guns. So anyway, on that note, we would love to thank you for joining us for yet another discussion among the Gun Cranks. And make sure you, as always, check out gunsmagazine.com, americanhandgunner.com. Actually, I always say guns first because that's my magazine. Let's do this.
Okay.
Check out americanhandgunner.com 2 or 3 times, and then come check out guns, and you'll see which is the better magazine. But anyway, also check out americancop.com. We have this healthy rivalry between us, and then Roy has to separate us. But seriously, check out all of our great websites. Check out our magazines, and we do some special publications. Tom, talk about those, please.
Yeah, check it coming up soon. DIY gunsmithing. Speaking of guns that you
Speaking
can make and work on in your home, you'll learn lots of valuable skills. Everything from beginner to intermediate to expert. So check it out.
Excellent. DIY special editions, and you can get those through our websites. And I believe some of them are on Amazon, aren't they, Tom?
Yep.
Speaking of evil corporate overlords, but hey, we got to sell them someplace, right? So anyway, check out all of our various and sundry publications. We write them for you. Make sure you leave us comments on this show and all of our others. You might want to check out last week's or the previous episode where we talk about nuclear war and melting Nazis and all that kind of stuff. So on behalf of Roy Huntington and American Handgunner editor Tom McHale, Esquire, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, bidding you adieu, and we'll see you at the next episode.